People are very resilient in this sense. In this kind of situation, they can find that they have. But I want to reflect on this topic a little bit more broadly and try, particularly the question of this conference today, which was given by the organizers to us. We are here to reflect on the future of Kahramanmaraş, the reconstruction, the transformation. And the question is whether architecture and planning can act as a transformative tool for both physical and social dimension to address the needs of rebuilding resilience. In the next 40 minutes to address this issue, the tools that we can put forward to be transformative. So first we need to understand what, and second is whether those can address not only the physical transformation of cities, but also the social. And this was given by you, of course, as a topic for me to reflect on. And it's interesting because I can see that in the room there are practitioners, architects, planners, but there are also lots of students. And as architects and planners, we cities to shape the built environment, to build up things. We need to develop a new set of skills, different. Something that is not tangible is the intangible dimension. City is actually possibly resilience. What brings together people together? What brings people together in this situation? Now, I mentioned the example of my family, like my grandfather that was hosting people in his house. That's an example of being resilient. But resilience, in a way, means that we are capable systems. Whatever shock and stress comes, it's an earthquake, is whatever, no matter what. But is it something that we can address as individuals, or we should kind of look at this as a response from the society where all the acts work towards building resilience? And this is the question for today. I have an assumption that I want to propose. When we talk about futures and how we can create a resilient future, we need to look holistically at where we are coming from. So the legacy of our cities, what we are inheriting. And what we are inheriting is somehow building in our memory. I mean, you are now rebuilding the mosque. We have yesterday, very interestingly, and you have to reconstruct, because this plays a symbolic role in the community. Interest and you kind of open up a little bit more, you see that other aspects that are part of the legacy of the city that we need to consider. There is the urban fabrics around buildings, around the historic areas, but then if you look at the wider scale of the neighborhood and city and so on, there is an old system of traces that are coming from the history that we need to recognize, because those are important to build the resilience for the future. So this is the city legacy. It's not only the heritage, it's more than that. It needs to be transformative and context sensitive. In a way, we need to recognize all these elements of the history if we really want to build up something for the future. Call on us to kind of think really in a forward-looking way about future places, heritage, but also social capital, social relations. And meantime, we need to project visions of hope. So we cannot forget that it's not just, and we need to adjust problems and find solutions. We need to project hope. Hope for the community, hope for the people, hope for the professionals. It's more than just technical solutions. Where we are now, well, I'm not going to. It is a particular moment in which you are possibly beyond the kind of emergency. So we are in the post-emergency now. It's been 2 years since the earthquake struck in Kahramanmaraş. And so now it's time to think about rebuilding those sort of wider infrastructure, both physical and social. Now, if we look at international documents, international organizations, now is the time to think in terms of ways is kind of shifting our mindset from the needs that are to accommodate people, to put them somewhere, to give shelter to people, to think and talk with something that is more long-term development objective, long-term strategy, and so on. So this is the... And I want to suggest 3 dilemmas and try to then respond to different case studies. One is a cultural dilemma. What is the role that culture can play in reconciliation heritage, which means that is capable to bounce back not to the previous point, but to the output of our intervention is something new. That's fundamental. Even in the process of we need to create something new. And we need to ensure that people they learn from this process. So there is a process of social learning. And if you don't engage people in the process, hardly this behind closed doors, and people can be more prepared to that. Other dimension of this evolutionary resilience concept is that the system, I mean, if we think in terms of technical solutions for buildings, it needs to be actually, but there has been also, let's say, it was both in the historic city center, so old structures, but also in especially those buildings that were built from the 60s to the 80s in the phase of the economic boom of the country, where basically we were building buildings quite rapidly and without stringent building regulations. This was a case that actually hit quite a lot the public opinion because it was a student dormitory who collapsed, and there were like 7 or 8 students who died, and it was there was then a court case in the tribunal and so on. One of the problems that was clearly evidenced was that although the country was used to earthquakes in the past, I mean, since the early 19th century, most of this area that was hit was put into the category of moderate seismicity. Let's say that means that there was not such a high probability of earthquake in that part. And that means that there was not adaptation of the building regulation, building codes, and that had to reduce the cost of construction. So that was kind of tolerated, the situation. In 1975, there was funding to build up, let's say, also regenerating the environment, that are really addressing the needs of communities and the city of Shusha was very interesting. And sorry, let me go back to these images because I'm not sure if yeah. So this is the project that has been put forward. The project, that was the outcome of the discussion, largely ignored the historic specificity of places, as I was saying before. There is lack of understanding of the old traces, of the old roads, of where actually the old buildings were located, how the city was working together. At best, what they could do was to put forward the restoration of some key landmark buildings, but no connection among them. The rest is a new master plan, and this is the result. The problem is that what is the risk of this? The risk of this is that you put forward a plan that is somehow abstract from the existing condition, with the hope that you will get back an economy of the city, but you are targeting something that is purely pro-profit to a certain extent. It's just to make the business start again. And this can be problematic because how you can then embed this plan into the life of a community, into the life of the city. And by the way, there are people that are now, after 3 decades, they are coming back from Baku to Shusha because they have lost the properties back then, and now they are reclaiming. So in reality, there is also people that is coming back. So how you address that? Is that the right answer, that's a question mark. Of course, it's such an extreme situation that it's hard to say whether it's the wrong or right response. What I know for sure, and that is what, for me, that I'm always trying to identify the fragments of future in places, is that there is a new generation of architects that are now rebuilding the public sector, and the local chamber of architects, if you like, they are actually coming from Baku. They decided to spend their youth in a certain way in this city for the reconstruction. There's a lot of energy to a certain extent, and they are mediating between the private sector kind of led development, the government, and the initial kind of community that is coming back. They are key to mediate and to try to embed this project into the reality. So I think that, and this is also a message, if you like, that the community of professionals can really play a big role, especially when communities are not yet involved or are not even there, as in this case. Now, I'm moving, I don't know how much time do I have, but I'm moving towards my last case. So, this is something that it's a project, it's a funded project. So we applied as university with a local university in Brazil, and it was, let's say, in response to the big floods that happened in Rio Grande do Sul, in the very south of the country, last May 2024. We got the grant in the summer, so it was really timing, because actually it's very hard sometimes to start a project just immediately after such an event. And we had the chance to visit, to do the first field, which is located on what actually created, well, on one hand you can say you can't do much because it's a climate disaster, we cannot predict, but that's also with the earthquake, you cannot do much, no? But actually you can do a lot to try to prevent, to be prepared, or to kind of trying to be more resilient for the future. First of all, one of the problems is that there was a kind of lack of collaboration between the government, the public sector, and the communities in a certain way. And also lack of understanding of where the real risks are, so that people were building in high-risk areas to a certain extent, and the government would close one eye on that, plus a mistrust between the two. So in that situation, we actually got the funding to do work about sort of co-designing with the local authorities and local communities a sort of a plan for resilience, no? Something like a recovery measures, if you like, that was, that no one could do it, and because of that mistrust at the moment. So universities, and here again is, and I'm pleased to see how much universities in this case are involved, can really fill the gap between the government and the communities and the civil society. And the whole idea was to come there to kind of test some tools for engagement of different stakeholders and thinking together, what is the future that you want? What are the problems that you are having? How we can envision together, let's say, an alternative kind of future, and how we can engage communities in this process. So we did all of these three things: talking with government, talking with business sector, talking with communities. There has been a series of workshops. This was with the local authority. Caxias do Sul is a city of 400,000 people. 40 people from local authorities came, meaning that actually they were very keen to kind of think about, to tell the problems. So we basically ask, what is not working to the imagination for the future? And from Brazil, we learned that it's important to test the way to integrate communities in decision-making, involving a trial and error approach. So we can do mistakes, obviously, it's part of life, and it can be also overwhelming, I say, because I mean, you have to deal with emotions.